Power creep, a term often used in online video games to describe a character that was previously released or introduced, or maybe even a weapon or mechanic that has previously grown weaker due to the increase of power that has come with newer characters or aspects. Now combine this with the Ghidorah, the false king who was introduced to King of the Monsters. Has Ghidorah gotten power creeped by the newer, stronger versions of the titans he could once beat, as well as some of the newer, more introduced titans? It has been a while since we've seen Ghidorah on screen, well, excluding the mecha form, but that doesn't really count. He's kind of a bitch, but actual Ghidorah we haven't seen in a hot minute. So, does Ghidorah really hold his name, or is he simply weak? Now, this won't be a full GXK scaling covering video of covering literally everyone's scaling and what they got in GXK. It's just going to be covering what's relevant enough to stack to Ghidorah. Like, Kong stated to be above Scylla. That doesn't really fucking matter. Like, he stated to be above Scylla, cool, that doesn't really change anything. Like, it doesn't really matter if he's being compared to fucking Ghidorah. I think anyone would say, oh, like, it's not really a debate. But besides the point, let's start off with Godzilla, as he's the baseline for the others mostly. Godzilla, even when he just absorbed the power plant and became Blue GXK, according to the novels, already stated to be at his peak and healthiest state. So he's already above the weak in 2021.
I mean, Godzilla's pretty tired. I mean, he hasn't had a chance to really slow down this entire movie. I mean, presumably he's been swimming around and, you know, going nuts in the ocean when he's not on screen, and so...
And should be around the same level as at base 2019 already. And that's pretty impressive. We haven't seen the level of power of a base 2019 since, well, 2019, pretty much. And then, later on, he absorbed Tiamat's DNA and absorbed even more energy from Tiamat's lair, which is said to outright have the most energy on the planet.
The Arctic lair sits in the direct path of electromagnetically charged solar winds, making it the largest stockpile of energy on Earth.
If Godzilla takes down Tiamat, he'll supercharge.
And then eventually he wakes up and holds 20 times more energy. Now, holding energy doesn't equate to power. This doesn't mean you can actually release the energy that you're holding up inside you, but it still is impressive nonetheless. And this makes sense that it's not an actual 20 times increase, as it's just stated to be a 2 times power boost in this base in 2019. And after this 2 times power boost, he fights Kong, and we'll get more into that later on, you know, who won the fight, who scales to who doesn't, yada yada. And he also eventually fights Shimo, which we'll get into more later, and a base Evo versus Shimo, I mean. And then eventually he becomes his spiral form, which according to the novel is comparable to the start of Nuke Amp Goji's form. This shouldn't be comparable to the later stages of Nuke Amp Goji's form, as we know that Nuke Amp Goji was constantly going stronger.
Is it just me, or has he been working out?
You kidding me? Sarazawa's got that lizard juiced.
Damn right.
Oh boy. Godzilla's radiation levels are going through the roof. We got about 12 minutes before he goes thermonuclear.
What do you mean?
I'm saying in about 12 minutes, it's gonna be a bad day to be a Red Sox fan.
Okay, guys, you need to find the Orca, get Madison, and get the hell out of there.
Whatever Sarazawa did to Godzilla worked a little too well, because he's about to explode like an atom bomb.
And they only got readings on the Nuke Amp Goji up to 6 minutes in this form, then they left because the Arca was kind of getting fucked up. At best, Spiral is comparable to the start of Nuke Amped Goji, which is still pretty impressive. And this origin of Goji also has similar statements to 2021, where he was the strongest thing at the time, which makes sense, as even a base Evo, not only in Hollow Earth was holding the advantage against Shimo, but in Rio he could put up a good fight against Shimo, even leaving wounds, even if he was losing. But then when he came into Spiral, he just kind of bodied Shimo, leaving a massive burn mark on her before just slamming her through building after building, which we can see off screen. Now, some might bring up the novel statements, but one, the novel doesn't hold as much validity as the movie. This is the same novel that went on to state, oh yeah, it's a Godzilla army versus Scar King's army, when the fucking movie just shows 1. And 2, it's just like Kong's perspective. Like, no reason that Kong should know anything about Spiral at all. He just saw Spiral for like the first time. So it's just kind of a knowledge claim essentially. But this is enough to beat Ghidorah. While a base 2019 was contending Ghidorah, and even according to the novelization, won their first encounter. Ghidorah, for a good portion of the film, before the final fight, was weakened from just waking up. Not only mentally, like as in he was disoriented and confused, but physically as well, to where he felt like he needed to regain his strength, and yet he was still able to overpower Godzilla in the Arctic mostly. And it's even referenced at this point in time, he was the stronger of the two. Not only himself, like he felt stronger, and he does this pose, which makes sense that he doesn't do the pose when it's a nuke amped Goji, and where that's more of an equal encounter. And even it's just referenced in general that he's just stronger, and that he's above every other Titan except for Godzilla in this weakened state. That's how strong even a weakened Ghidorah was. Hell, even underwater, Ghidorah could leave massive marks on that base 2019. So a base 2019, which was the peak of his power and essentially equal to a blue GXK, struggles with Ghidorah underwater. More or less on land, where Ghidorah can just kind of beat him up. What about Spiral, however? Nuke amped Goji was beating up Ghidorah, right? Well, kinda. It was stated by Greg Keeves that without Mothra they were relatively equal, and the film shows it too. Not only does a nuke amped Goji suffer wounds, a lot of wounds, scars, and burns before Ghidorah gets amps himself, Ghidorah could slam Goji down, he could tank attacks, even outright tanking a prolonged exposure from the nuke amped atomic breath. And the only time it really showed that nuke amped Goji was winning on Ghidorah outright was the novelization at one point. So, at the worst, nuke amped Goji is comparable and is equal to a base Ghidorah, if not slightly strong. So, essentially Spiral, who doesn't really compare to the later ends of nuke amped Ghidorah, and only compared to the start, is equal to a base Ghidorah, pretty much. And even if you want to say Spiral is stronger, Ghidorah just regenerates through Spiral. It's not like as the only way that Goji can effectively take out Ghidorah is via vaporizing him with pulses, which we never see Spiral do. More or less to the same power extent that Thermo was, as Thermo should be above Spiral. And he just absorbs his energy, becoming
fearsome evolve.
So, while Spiral is definitely a lot of trouble for Ghidorah, and they're around the same strength and durability wise, if not Ghidorah's maybe slightly above, Ghidorah's regeneration and hacks kind of clear him out of this one. Kong does get a physical amp via the Beast Glove, however it does not amp his speed and durability. People do like to compare the stomping scenes between the two, however the main problem with the stomping scenes is just the fact that from the one in GVK, not only does Godzilla dig his feet deeper, Kong took a much more of a beating. Keep in mind that the fight in GVK was 12 hours, and it just consisted more of 12 hours of Kong getting his ass beat, mostly. And while GVK did step on Kong more, think of it like this. If someone punches you mildly hard 3 times, that's not gonna hurt as one punch to the groin. Like, think of it that way. The stomps are not hitting as hard or as deep as the single one that was literally craving into his chest. So while Kong does get a physical amp via the Beast Glove, just his strength gets stronger, he doesn't get a speed or durability amp. And Kong is stated to be one of the strongest titans at the time, obviously not including like Shimo and Godzilla, and probably a couple others too. We obviously know one of the most contentious fights of the film is Evo Godzilla versus Kong. Well, Kong definitely does a lot better. He doesn't really scale to Goji, at least to a massive degree, or to what people think he does. At best, he's really sub-relative. That's like generous. The novel did confirm for one that Kong stopped holding back when he threw those punches, and even if, that doesn't affect his durability anyways. And all the first punch did was make him stumble, as it makes sense Godzilla's charging at Kong if Kong knocks him off balance. then he's gonna fall over. Kong can't actually physically knock Godzilla over, he can just make him lose his balance. And then we see later, Godzilla essentially tanks every hit Kong throws at him with no damage whatsoever. He doesn't even give roars or reactions. The only reaction he gave, roar-wise or noise-wise, was the roar he did at the first punch when he stumbled over. And with the final hit, he flips Godzilla over, once again with no damage or sign of it. And there's no evidence of a time skip whatsoever either. It's just the fact that we see dust, and then once dust settles, the Godzilla that was flipped from the punch is wide-ass awake and is even smiling. He smiles like he did in GBK. Then he gets back up fine. According to the novel, after he shoots the atomic breath, he just straight up blitzes Kong to where he cannot react, and pins him down with a single foot. And then the novel outright states Kong is helpless, taunts him before Martha shows up to save Kong. So, in conclusion, Kong doesn't scale to Goji really. He kinda gets his ass beat when Godzilla took him more seriously. And it makes sense that he went more seriously in the final part of the fight than he did at the start. Because unless you think that Godzilla's stomps have more of an impact than a tackle through a pyramid or a suplex, which doesn't make sense whatsoever, then obviously it's not the case. And to kind of go back on the knocking out portion, if you think the novelization backs up Kong knocked out Goji, which doesn't make sense, you can make several other interpretations for that, then you also think the suplex knocked out Kong, since it says the exact same thing in both scenarios. So it would be disingenuous to say, if you think one knocks one out, then you think the other knocks the other out. It's simple. And this makes a lot of sense still, that he wouldn't really scale to Evo Godzilla, as even he weakened holding back Kong in GBK.
If you look at Godzilla really carefully, like, he knows that he's kind of just playing with Kong the entire time. You know, like, if you look at the ship battle fight, they had that kind of like moment where Kong is almost drowned and he's like laying on the boat and Godzilla shows up and they're kind of staring each other down. Godzilla's kind of laughing at him and like, okay, you know, like, just stay right there and we're good, you know. And I think the whole time, like, Godzilla kind of thinks that they're sort of having fun. You know, if Kong dies, whatever, he doesn't really care, but like, he's not really too worried about it.
You know, it's life and death for Kong. Kong's trying to stay afloat, trying to stay alive. But, you know, at the end of the day, Godzilla's Godzilla. I mean, you can't kill Godzilla. Look at him, he's like smiling here. Like, right? He's having fun. Kong is not having fun. This scene, Godzilla's having fun. I mean, like, he's not really worried about losing. He's really not. I mean, I know maybe it seems like he is in certain parts. He's got something to do. He's here to go get Godzilla and take him out. Oh, by the way, you know, Godzilla's not worried about Kong. He's just having fun. You know, like, he's here to get Godzilla. He knows that Godzilla's the threat. Maybe he doesn't know what Godzilla is, but he knows that there's something here that he's got to kill.
Can rip apart through Kong's durability without trying. And even in the first fight, like, even out of water, he could have killed Kong several times. So yeah, this alone should prove that Kong doesn't stand a shred of a chance against Ghidorah. If even Spiral most likely loses to Ghidorah, more or less Evolve also most likely loses to Ghidorah. To make it even more consistent, Ghidorah is referenced, aside from Godzilla, to be leagues above everything else in the verse at not only the King of the Monsters time, but also post that, during GBK time and post GBK time, implying at least a couple tiers between everything else and him. This statement probably does exclude Shimo, since the humans didn't really know about Shimo yet, and even Kong's quote-unquote 2 times amp. Since then, shouldn't close a several tier gap at all. Ghidorah should clear Kong with these. Just to add it here, since Scar King is below not only a base Kong, since we know base Kong would have killed him and Scar fears Kong, but a Beast Glove Kong to a higher degree, as Beast Glove Kong was overpowering him more, even knocking out his tooth. You can imagine how that goes. Now, for the most heated topic in the community right now, Ice Poodle versus the Noodle. Very, very obviously, Shimo does scale above a base evolve. While it doesn't weaken her ability, she was getting off-guarded by an evolved Godzilla, and then when she started to focus on him, she would overpower Evo Goji constantly, to the point she threw him across all of Rio, and according to the novel, knocked him down for a decent bit. Which the novel does seem to support that a Shimo is pretty decently above a base Evo, but and while Shimo doesn't really beat Spiral as well, so Shimo should essentially be in between Evolve and Spiral power-wise. And however, Shimo does have more direct comparisons to Ghidorah, according to the novel, and hell, she even froze him, right? She could be Ghidorah. Her beam is absolute 0, so regeneration can only do so much, right? Well, it's not as simple as that, sadly. For the Ice Blast, well, it is absolute 0, as I just said. It can freeze Ghidorah if it hits. Shimo's beam was interrupted by the random electric bat things in GXK. Now imagine Ghidorah's storm, the massive Category 6 storms that release EMPs and can even consume entire titans into it, according to the description of the human.
Whose storm swallowed both men and gods alike.
Even if Shimo doesn't get interrupted by this storm, Ghidorah can dodge the beam, Kong can dodge and react to the beam, and at the least, a GVK Godzilla scales to Kong's speed, if not a GXK Godzilla to a higher degree, maybe even to a blitzing point, and Ghidorah should be able to keep up with both of those Godzillas if he's able to keep up with a nuclear Godzilla. So Ghidorah should still win. Shimo's only main win con is her absolute 0 cannon, which has very low chances of even getting off, more or less even hitting. Ghidorah is stronger and more dark. As we know, Shimo's below Spiral, and Spiral and Ghidorah are comparable, with Ghidorah having a slight edge. And at the very worst case, Ghidorah just out-haxes and absorbs Shimo's energy. So now we go back to the question, was Ghidorah power creeped? Well, overall not really. He's still above the new and old Titans, except for maybe Spiral. And, well, Godzilla's Godzilla. I don't think it's really a power creep to say he's possibly below Godzilla, as he's below Godzilla when he gets stronger in the Heisei era, for example. This is really new for him in terms of being below Godzilla after you can't tell. Even in some of the Millennium films, he's below that. So I wouldn't even consider that a downscale for him, considering even the statements imply they're the same tier in 2019. So, and it's not like Godzilla's weak either. So it's not really a downscale even if you consider Ghidorah below Godzilla. At worst he's below Spiral, at best he's above Spiral, and either way he's above everything else. He's above the Ice Puppy, he's above the monkeys, he's above the fucking LGBTQ members. So, in conclusion, I guess Ghidorah does retain his title of whatever title he fucking had.